We have comic writer Jeremy Whitley here to talk about all the stuff he's written for us, but mainly your upcoming The Unstoppable Wasp.
Yes.
Please
coming
tell
back.
us you've been writing for Nadia van Dyne for a while now, and now she's getting another series. What do you have in store for her?
So to start off, we're going to be the nice thing is we get to jump right back into this volume, because the first volume we set up the whole lab, we introduced our new characters, so now everybody knows them and we're going right into them, and we're going to have a conflict with AIM, so we're going to have some science versus science action going on in this first arc.
And what kind of enemies are they going to be facing, if you can tell us?
Yeah, so we're bringing back AIM, who's been sort of out of the game for a while, our evil science gang that all dress like beekeepers for some reason. But we're bringing back in Monica Rappaccini, who was in the first volume of Wasp, and she's put together her own team with some new faces and a couple of old ones as we go on, that I think both fans of Unstoppable Wasp and fans of teenage Marvel characters throughout the years will really enjoy seeing.
And you also write for Thor vs. Hulk.
Yes.
What is it like going from giant heroes to little tiny little heroes?
I remember expressing to my editor on that, I've been writing comics for 7 years, and this is the first time I've written a comic where two big guys punch each other. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure I know how to do this, but then Thor and Hulk are so much fun as characters. I like that sort of sense of humor Thor that we get in places like Ragnarok. Yeah. So, just having him in there, having a good time, being Thor, and then, we get to write Hulk being Hulk. And that's, it's one of those things, once you start writing it, you're like, oh yeah, I know what these guys sound like. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Pretty amazing. But you've always really loved comic books. This is a thing. And this might be the first time you've gone from big to small, but this is not, you started writing comic books pretty young.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've told the story before that I had a teacher in second grade that was like, all right, we're gonna draw some pictures and write what's going on in them, and I was like, oh, it's a comic book, right? So of course I wrote this story that we were supposed to be doing for this about the X-Men, and then at one point Stan Lee was doing a signing in the Bay Area where I was living, and I was I brought this into him. I was like, Stan, I'm writing an X-Men story, He was super encouraging and signed it for me, and he was like, just keep writing there, true believer. And
he was like, oh my god.
I was like, all right, and then I haven't stopped since then.
That's awesome.
It's pretty incredible.
So you're in a family full of women. You have
Yes.
a wife and two daughters. How excited are they about the Agents of Girl and Nadia van Dyne?
My wife and my oldest daughter, who's 7, are really excited about it. They love Wasp. My daughter went and saw the movie with me when it came out. She's really picky about what movies she'll watch. She didn't like Black Panther because it had too much stabbing in it.
Oh.
But Ant-Man and the Wasp she loves. She's really into science. And my 1-year-old, if it's not My Little Pony, she doesn't really care at this point.
So she'll come around.
From the Bay Area, myself as well, if you could choose a Marvel character that you could sit down with coffee with, who would you choose? And why?
That's a good question.
I feel like it would have to be Steve Rogers, right?
Yeah. It's the second time we've heard that name. That's so funny.
I feel like if you sat down with Cap and had coffee, you'd walk out of that feeling so full of hope and excited about life. It didn't matter what you talk about. It's just small talk. You talk to Steve Rogers for half an hour, you're gonna come out of there and be like, yeah, I'm gonna go make a difference. Things are gonna be great.
It's inspired, yes.
Yeah, it's a good way to keep your spirits up. If you're having a bad day, then I guess Steve Rogers is a great way to kind of lift yourself back up, because he's probably not going to bring you down.
Yeah, I really liked, back when Bendis was doing New Avengers, there's an issue where Carol Danvers was talking about Steve Rogers and just how great it is to talk to Steve Rogers and how much she loves him, and I'm like, yeah, that seems right. That's the Captain America that's right for me, is this guy who it doesn't matter what you're talking about, what you're doing, who you are, just being around him, you walk away, you're like, gosh, things are great.
Yeah.
Everything up to this point has been a void until I talked to Steve Rogers.
Yeah, things are really gonna turn around for me.
Well, when you were writing, obviously you were into the X-Men. Were there any other comic book characters, any other arcs, any other stories that stuck out to you that you feel like inspire your work now, or just was like, I'm going to go from, I really like this, I'm drawing this, like, you know what, I'm going to do this for a living. Like, this is a thing I'm going to do.
I remember I really liked X-Men and Spider-Man. I remember at one point when I was reading comics when like the Age of Apocalypse started, and like there was just this huge shift, and they were just telling suddenly these different stories that I had never thought about with the X-Men, and they're just vastly different versions of these characters. And I was like, wow, like comics can do anything. Like you couldn't do that in a movie franchise or a TV show. Like change that so drastically and show this different world. And that was like really exciting to me, is seeing like the possibilities with that.
Yeah, so your comic story began pretty early. Your father introduced you to them. You had a local comic book shop. Like, tell us a little bit about your comics origin story as a kid.
So I was a kid in, I was born in '84, so like the early '90s, and so there was this really great X-Men TV show on TV at that point, and like that and Spider-Man, and I used to like get up early on Saturday mornings to go watch him.
Bowl of cereal.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was just mentioning like I read a lot as a kid, so like I was in the Book It program, and like I'd go cash in to get my pizzas.
Mm-hmm.
And
We
then
remember
like
Book
I
It.
really
Yeah.
loved the Book It program. Like, it changed my life.
yeah, and then like
We were all
that
about that.
show, the X-Men show, was so big that they were like Pizza Hut was just like giving out comics with pizzas at that point. And I remember like getting an X-Men comic from there and being like, wow, this is really cool. And my dad had been a long time comics fan, and he was like, yeah, I should get back in and just start taking you guys to the comic store. So we had a store called Fact Fiction and Fantasy in Livermore, California.
Yep.
Where we used to go down and get comics, and I was into like Spider-Man and X-Men, and my brother and I used to collect all the like Marvel Masterpiece trading cards and stuff.
Cool.
I'm still on Book It because I clearly remember.
Book It's great.
I never got comics through my Book It program. Did you?
I did not get comics through my Book It program.
You had the best Book It program, Jeremy Whitley.
You did.
You got comics and free pizza. That's like,
seems great.
I did
Win-win.
get free pizza.
what
Yeah,
else could a 90s
so did I.
kid want?
Yeah, right.
So
Nothing else.
yeah,
I'm
so
pretty
let's
sure.
talk a little bit more about the Unstoppable Wasp, because she is working with Scott Lang. And they seem a little bit mismatched, but yet they seem to also bring out the best in each other.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you write Scott Lang as Nadia van Dyne's partner.
Yeah, I think they make for an interesting combination, because Nadia is so friendly, and she likes everybody, and she's easygoing, and just sort of wants to be friends with everybody. But also like Scott is a guy who's like entry into being a superhero is stealing Nadia's dad's costume and like running around and being a criminal, basically. So like,
Well, it's good to have hobbies.
yeah, it's the one of the few guys that she comes in with some sort of preconceived notion about. So, and Scott is always the guy that can't catch a break. So it would make sense that just like she doesn't get along with Peter in the Avengers, like it's always the guys that that can't catch a break that somehow Nadia doesn't want to be friends with. But everybody else, so it totally makes sense to me for Scott to be like, but you like everybody else. Why don't you like me?
You mentioned earlier with Thor vs. Hulk that this was a new thing for two heavy hitters going at it at full speed. Where did you draw inspiration from, and how did you get that? How did you get to that writing level?
I think it's a lifetime of like having seen animated series and movies and stuff like that, and video games, and like wanting to do as big a story as we could. Like we started out with like, I think our goal was, we started out in space, and we were like, we want to go big. They're out there like busting these meteorites that are being thrown at the Earth, and like my goal was to start as big as I could think, and then just keep getting bigger, because I feel like there's no way that I could be like, oh, I'm gonna do better at Thor than like Walt Simonson, right? Like I'm not gonna do a better Thor than that guy, but like to tell like the biggest, craziest kind of story we can in the space that we have, like that was the really cool thing. That is, it's a competition, so there's sort of sending them around to do these Herculean tasks. So we're just sort of throwing them to all the far-flung corners of the universe, and it's like, all right, Thor and Hulk just get thrown into this thing, and they have to deal.
Yep.
So let's see what they do.
So speaking of Herculean tasks, Ant-Man and the Wasp are kind of OG Marvel characters. They were part of the original Avengers. Of course, that was Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne. So you're mostly focusing on Nadia and Scott. Did that kind of take some pressure off, or was there still a huge amount of pressure writing for these really original, old school, decades-old legendary characters?
Yeah, I think Nadia is a really interesting character in that she's so tied into the Marvel Universe and all these things that have been part of the Marvel Universe since, the beginning of, like, those characters are created by, like, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Like, it doesn't get any more OG than that. Like, but, like, she's so tied into that, but at the same time, she's a new character. So I feel like there's this wide range of things you can do where you can introduce, new stuff, but also the old stuff is new to her. So, she's seeing a lot of these things for the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, I'm in love with it. Like, the pens are downstairs.
Yeah, and you mentioned you had a panel earlier. So talk a little bit about that for those at home who couldn't be here with it.
Well, we just had the True Believers panel across the street in the Hilton, and it was really great because we finally got to show some of the new artwork from the new volume of Unstoppable Wasp, which Guri Hiru is drawing, and they're just beautiful pages, and I've had to sit on those for a couple weeks now. It's like those are coming in, and that's the really amazing thing about writing comics is like you come up with this idea and you put it down on paper, but then like it comes back to you fully like realized in 3D and color and everything. So it was really cool to get to show all that stuff off and to get to like really thank Marvel fans because they're the reason that this book is back. Like, it did leave, it didn't have great numbers in the like original single issues, but it's found this new life in the collections and people were really excited about it and really like talking it up to Marvel, and like the numbers are there that they wanted to come back and do more.
And that's actually what I was going to mention. The pens are downstairs. Everyone's absolutely in love with the Wasp pen that we have here at San Diego Comic-Con, exclusively at San Diego Comic-Con. I know I have it on my lanyard. But also we had this amazing cosplay yesterday. There were some very cool surprises, and it was really, really awesome. Not just to see how people were coming in with Ant-Man, but also that Wasp is getting this new life, that folks are really excited about playing her and like really coming out and showing their support. So it's been absolutely incredible. How are your thoughts now? This is like a new life. This is great.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. Like I love writing her as a character. She's so upbeat and excited, and like all the things that I love about comics is she is. It's we can have fun. We can do basically anything we want to because we've got this team of girl geniuses that can create anything we want to, go anywhere we want to, and there's this whole toy box of the Marvel Universe to play in. So we already did all the building we need to do in the first volume, so now we get to really just go out and play.
Speaking of cosplayers, have you been able to walk the floor and see any cosplayers that really were just like, yes, I love that Wasp, or anything like that?
Yeah, I've seen several really good ones here. My favorite are, I've seen a couple of younger girls dressed as the Wasp, and that's always like, oh, it's a tiny Wasp. I'm so excited about that. Yeah, I think nothing will beat, though, in the first volume we had a scientist that we profiled. Her name was Tamara. She was on Mythbusters and everything, and she's really awesome. And like we profiled her in the comic, and then she turned around and like built her own cosplay of the Wasp to like go to shows and dress as. Amazing. So yeah, that was pretty amazing to have a real life scientist running around dressed as the Wasp.
Wow,
that's like a dream.